This episode of the Gooner Ramble is sponsored by the new sporting betting app called Bookie. That's Bookee. Sign up using the promo code podcast, deposit and bet £10 in multiple bets for a free £10 bet. Please bet responsibly.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Gooner Ramble podcast. I'm here with my erstwhile friend and colleague Akhil. You can catch him on Twitter at 10Akhil. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, good. We're kind of the two that just keep coming on now, aren't we? We've found our place in the team. You know, as long as just don't call me Granit Xhaka or something like that, because he's found his way in the team as well. But
yeah, don't call me on any.
Yeah, well, but he's not in the team, is he? So
yeah, right.
more of a I don't know who you can be. You could be
well, I'm definitely not a Wobie then. How about that?
Petr Cech, or I think if I called you a Wobie, that would probably someone would accuse me of being maybe borderline racist. So Petr Cech maybe someone who's there, but sometimes
a bit of a helmet. I am a bit
hey.
Right, cool. And also joining us once again, we have the one and only Ryan Rocastle. How you doing, mate? You good?
Thanks for having me on.
Welcome
No
back
problem.
indeed.
You're the only one that talks sense from the three of us, so we needed someone.
Yeah. And if you didn't know already, you can catch Ryan at Rocastle7. Okay, let's kick it off. Really want to start with just briefly touch on the atmosphere at the game on Sunday. Not so much the game. I think it's been done to death now. How many hundreds of podcasts have talked about it. I really want to talk about the atmosphere at the game and how really you could say that Wenger, in a way, has united one aspect of the fan base. Akhil, you went. I bailed out last minute. You went.
You did.
You always go home and away.
Yeah.
I have to say this season, you know, going away from home, the few that I have been to, that's the hardcore support, you could say. Whereas in recent seasons, there's been lots of fights and arguments and, you know, there's been a split in the sort of camp. This season, there's been less fights, there's been less arguments, there's been less split. I mean, people still probably do, there are probably some that go one way or the other, but there's not so much appetite for argument now. How do you see it?
Firstly, you say the hardcore, but I mean, you know, there's people that go to every home game, have been going for every home game for years. There's some people across other countries who wake up at sort of 3 a.m. I was actually, I spoke to, you know, my mate CJ, who's been on the podcast once before, and one of my obviously good mates outside of football, and he's currently coaching in China, and he was saying that the Chelsea game a couple of weeks ago, he kind of watched it at 3 a.m. So it's, there's commitment everywhere. In terms of the match going, yeah. It was quieter at Bournemouth. It's been quieter. I mean, what I would say is it's harder to go now. And when I mean that, I mean it's hard to describe. I mean, I can only say it from a personal point of view, but with our kind of away form this year, there has been games where I've just thought, do I really want to go? Like, you know, and I've never done that before. I remember sort of West Brom on New Year's Eve, and, you know, okay, fine, maybe partly because it was New Year's Eve, but, you know, I thought, well, it's only Birmingham, I'll be back by sort of 8:30, which I was. But it was just like that morning, I was like, do I really want to go? And then I only went because someone offered to give me a lift, and I just thought, okay, fine, I'll go. But it's, you know, it happened again with the Forest game, even with Bournemouth the night before. I was just thinking, oh God, like, you know, and that's never happened to me before, and I have a feeling that's happening to a lot of people, and there's people I've spoken to this season, and people, you know, we've got about 20 of us in a row that sit together at away games, and it's happening to a few of them as well, and it's just, it's
apathy.
it is. It's total apathy, and it's flat. There was periods in that Bournemouth game when it was quiet in that ground, and that was more at 0-0, maybe because Bournemouth haven't played that well either. And by the way, Bournemouth aren't very good. How they beat us, I'll never know. I mean, maybe 2 defensive errors, maybe, but they're not very good, and their fans know that as well. And it was quiet, it was dull, it was pin drop at times. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's just, it's not the same at the moment. Before it was, we were united in terms of when you chant, when there's nothing better than 3,000 of you chanting an Arsenal song, and you're loud, you've taken over the whole ground. TV cameras can hear you. It's like the world can hear you. But at the moment, that's just not happening. I mean, it briefly happened at Chelsea, but that was more because we were singing to the Chelsea fans, "You bought it all." When they were saying that we've won it all, we said, "You've bought it all." And in a way, we united then, but it was more about just having a go at Chelsea than really supporting our own team, if that makes sense. So. Yeah, it's tough at the moment. And then what do you expect? We've won 3 games away from home all season, and if you look at those 3, Palace was a decent game and decent performance. Burnley we won in the last second, so you don't even really count that, as in there was 92 minutes where it was 0-0. So, and then Everton, obviously we probably was our best performance away from home, but it's just not there, and you feel, wow, and you said Wenger brought it together, and I wouldn't go that far. I just think people are now just tired of arguing. I certainly am. I would have got into debates away from home plenty of times, and if people say things behind me or in front of me, and they call so and so the C bomb. A couple of years ago, I would have reacted and said, "Come on, man! They're still our players, or he's still our manager." But now I just can't be asked. I just think I can't be asked with the hassle. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, we'll still go, but yeah,
the appetite is waning.
There needs to be something. Something needs to kind of happen, and even someone who's obviously always respected Arsene Wenger and pretty much always supported him, like I would support any manager at this football club. But I think potentially at the end of the season, if he does go, someone fresh comes in, that could potentially help. That would just, again, gives people something to look forward to. But at the same time, there needs to be, if Sanchez goes this January, it's kind of part 1 starts now. We do need to replace him. We do, if we get, the 3 we're looking at, if we can get all 3 between sort of now and the next 2 windows, or at least 2 this window, then that could start to re-energize a little bit. And then if there is a change in manager, it could re-energize everyone. But at the moment, it's very flat.
Ryan, over to you. You go to home. I've seen your home games and whatnot, and you go when you can. What do you feel when you go in there and you watch games? What do you and your people feel?
Yes, I'm kind of with where Akhil is. It's I mean, to be fair, once I am there, like for an away game especially, once I am there, I am up for it. I am. But the thought of going to them at the minute is just really off-putting. Like if especially when there's it's a long journey on a Sunday and there's trains delayed, and I think I'm where Akhil is. Before I would have, I'd have done whatever I could to get to if there was a ticket for an Arsenal away game, especially because I really enjoy going to them. But now at the minute, I am at that stage where it's like, if it's on TV, I think I probably would rather just watch it on TV, because I think a lot of that is to do with how we're performing. But it's not just that we're not winning games. We're not playing. I can't say I've sat away from home, especially watching it on the TV, and say I've enjoyed watching it, because one thing I think about Arsene Wenger's teams, even when we haven't done so well, is they've always played good football. And I think, like what Akhil says, I think we played really well against Everton, played well for a half against Palace, and there was a couple of others that we maybe might have. But in the overall, I think what we've got away from home I'd say at least 80% of the games we have deserved, you know. But I don't, it's about that debate, you know, you do feel a bit bad then, because sometimes you think, well, just because we're doing well, so if we start doing well, then does that mean everyone sort of, and myself included, does that mean I start, you know, coming back to these games? And it's
Glory Hunters FC.
Yeah, it's that debate. But I think how it currently is, I feel the same way as Akhil.
Can I ask you guys, in a way, would you rather go back to what people term as like the peak, the height of the banter era, which is probably, I don't know, 2008 to 2011, when we were playing absolutely magnificent football at times, with on a budget, we weren't spending, we definitely weren't getting the likes of Alexis Sanchez and Mesut Ozil in our team, but the players that he was bringing in, the style and philosophy that he had over the team, it made it exciting to watch. Even though we went down, we'd go down we'd lose a 4-0 lead at Newcastle, we'd lose a 4-2 lead at home to Tottenham in the dying embers of the game. I mean, those days were great days, weren't they, Akhil?
Yeah. I mean, the more I've probably taken a bit of a step back in the last 6 months to a year and tried to think of things more objectively, and for me, it kind of showed that, that Arsene Wenger he was very good at that. That was kind of, what he was good at in terms of finding these kind of gems, and obviously in the earlier days we taught real gems in the Nicolas and El Coca-Cola Toure kind of things, but then in the later years it was those kind of Thomas Rosickis, Halebs, Eduardo, players that people knew, but maybe just didn't know if they would make it or not, or were kind of on the fringes. I mean, Rosicky was obviously had a good Euro and stuff, or was it World Cup, whatever it was before he came, but it was kind of, it showed that, I don't know, that was maybe his strength, whereas when we've gone to this kind of buying big players, big personalities, potentially has he struggled to kind of manage them? And I think Sanchez is obviously quite an example, but then maybe Sanchez is a bit unique in that way, because, I don't know, but yeah. No, but I was going to say, at least in those days when people used to say Arsenal play good football, we did play good football, and it was exciting football, and yeah, fine, we you mentioned a couple of them, and when, the 4-4s and things like that, but it was exciting football. When we played, and at the moment, about a year ago or 2 years ago, you used to get lazy pundits still saying, well, Arsenal Wenger teams and Arsenal always play good football, but actually they hadn't watched Arsenal much, and now no one's really saying it, because we're quite slow on the ball, we're not quite moving as much, we don't break like we used to, and everyone's enjoying watching Man City. So, do I want to go back to that banter era in terms of at least football? I think because with where we are with Arsene Wenger, probably not, because there's going to be something fresh. If not this summer, certainly next summer, you would think. So probably not, because I think it's now for someone else to build an identity. But I don't know. It's just shown that actually, potentially, I don't know, it was more enjoyable then, but then we've won 3 FA Cups kind of in the last 4 years, so there's a balance there.
Ryan, we've just touched on the superstars, and Akhil said how, and we all know how Wenger struggled to manage Alexis Sanchez. In a way, he's also had his struggles with Mesut Ozil, not so much in the personality, but making sure, but sort of like treating him almost in cotton wool, where he's giving him time off during mid-season and whatnot. We've heard him have suspect knee injuries, flus, blah, 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 to go off from book signings and whatnot. He's really sort of had to manage these superstars a bit differently from how you'd expect a Wenger to manage these guys. Have these guys sort of had what kind of effect do you think these guys have had on the team, should I ask?
I mean, it's
and the management of them on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, Arsene he's managed big personalities before. Obviously, people like Thierry Henry, Sol Campbell, Vieira, they're big personalities.
But they turned into big, Soul maybe not, but they turned into big personalities. They weren't big maybe when they came. That's the difference, though.
Right. Okay, yeah. I think that what he's had trouble doing, Arsene, in some aspects, is he's had trouble separating the players from sort of being loyal to them, and then and being a good manager to them. So sometimes I'm not just talking about Sanchez and Ozil here, but I'm just some of the players who he's shown a lot of belief in. I think sometimes it's admirable that he has done it, because it obviously shows that he cares about them, not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. But I think that at times you have to be a football manager and sometimes be a bit harsher. So if, for example, if Mesut Ozil wants an extra break, an extra day off and such, he's got to think, is that best for my team? Not is that best for Mesut Ozil? And to be fair, that we've never actually been confirmed that Ozil just has these days off. But I think that the problem he has, that if you do that for one, then what kind of message does it say to another? And I just think that he just maybe hasn't quite got that balance between being being the manager of the football team and being the manager of the football team and sort of being a close person to those people, almost like a father figure. Whereas I guess maybe because we were winning things, but in the era before, maybe before the Emirates, it seemed like almost every single player, he had that relationship almost perfect, if you know what I mean. It seemed like that the players saw him as like a father figure to them, whereas now I don't know if all of them do.
Just on that, and it's just I'm thinking out loud, but I think Ryan's spot on, but you think of those personalities, those Thierry Henry's, Patrick Vieira's. Okay, maybe now the relationship's gone a little bit the other way, but at the time they were obviously very close, but he seemed to know when to let them go, and up till sort of 2007-8, no one was arguing about his record about when he let players go. Thierry went at 29, which is the same age as Robin, Van Persie and Alexis Sanchez. Obviously went to a different team, and so maybe that's more the point. But he seemed to let people go at the right time. Thierry didn't quite hit it off at Barcelona, but then not many people do with Messi around, including Neymar even. But, Patrick Vieira, obviously Juventus, Inter, maybe, and then City. It wasn't, his peak was obviously at Arsenal, and Robert Pires went to Villarreal. So it was, he let them go at the right time, whereas now you would think, has he held on to a few for too long? And some would argue Theo Walcott, who's obviously we're talking about a lot today, but there has been other examples there, and maybe that's because of the wage structure, and offloading them was harder because who's going to pay Matty Debussy 60 grand or 70 grand, whatever. But it just seemed like maybe he slightly lost his way because of the stadium move, because of restricted finances, and then he's never quite managed to get back to where he was because maybe he had to go too far down. I think in sort of 20 years we'll look back at this even more objectively and think, actually, did he do the right thing with some players, or was it potentially the wrong thing? But I just don't think we know the answer yet, because we need to see how the next 10 years goes, and we need to see how his successor and the successor after that does, I think.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I mean, that's why I say, it's speculation really what we're saying, because even
absolutely, yeah.
Arsenal's a very, very private football club, isn't it? It's not like a Chelsea or where all the mess is out in public. Yeah. We don't actually really know what exactly is going on behind the scenes. But I'm just judging it by what I've seen before. Is that I just felt that he was he had the player relationship, sort of the player and manager relationship better in the previous in the previous period than he has in this one, just by an outsider's viewer.
Yeah.
It seems as though, I mean, it seems in this regime now, some players are more equal than others, and it's breeding a kind of resentment because not everyone's pulling in the same direction. At least with the Invincibles era and the era before that, everyone was pulling in the right direction. So if Thierry was a bit of a prima donna, it was okay because, like you say, we were winning things. Everyone was pulling in the right direction. You had players that like Sol and guys like that would pull them up. You know, in this current regime, we're hearing all kinds of news coming out of the training ground. Like you say, Ryan, it's all speculation, but there are some things that have a lot more smoke than others, and it just seems as I mean, right, she was saying offline that James Ollie wrote a piece today, and players are hoping that the situation's resolved. They want him out of the club. They want Sanchez out of the club because he's causing too much, disruption. They believe that he's the chief of all this sort of unease.
Well, we've seen Southampton away, Wilshere had a word with him, and visibly we all saw it. There's been rumours about Ramsey, and Ramsey at the same time didn't get on with Van Persie either. So maybe is it Ramsey? I don't know, but it does seem that way a little bit. That it's James Ollie's piece said that they want a resolution by sort of as quickly as possible before the next game, more than maybe they want Sanchez gone, even though I think he did hint a few of them might have, but I might have to check that. But Ryan's spot on about that sort of, we're quite a private club, you don't hear about things. So, there's massive rumours that Koscielny and Sanchez haven't quite got on since that sort of training ground incident when there was a tackle on him or something, and then he stormed off, and Koscielny as a captain tried to kind of go after him, but he just had none of it. And then since then it's been, and then, obviously it was actually my video that started it, but against Crystal Palace when not everyone celebrated, and he kind of told Lacazette, why aren't they coming, and things like that. And at the time, fans then wanted to unite a little bit in terms of wanted to it was like it was the media against kind of Arsenal, and I know Thierry kind of talked about it on Sky, which I thought was a bit naughty because Thierry's personality was very much the sort of Reyes time, and Thierry was certainly in his last year, he was very much, he wanted the ball all the time.
He was a diva.
Well, yeah, he got annoyed at teammates when they didn't give him the ball, very much like Sanchez. So I thought it was a bit naughty of him maybe talking about it, but it does show that there looks like a divide, and it was something. I mean, I tweeted it after Palace and I took the video only because I'd seen it so many times and never really, I'd spoken about it a few times, but people were telling me that, nah, it's in your head, you're seeing what you want to see, and I just felt I want to show you what I'm seeing because I see it so often. This was a couple of games after Southampton where we saw, or was it maybe before actually? But we've seen it a few times, so it was kind of it was before Palace, wasn't it? Southampton was before, so we've seen it so much that I just think it's. Yeah, there is something in that, and as fans, we don't want the media to be right, and we want to obviously support our team, and it's one of those things. But for me, there has been a bit of a divide, and I don't think Arsene Wenger's very. I say we all know it's hearsay again, as Ryan says, but a lot of players do say Arsene Wenger doesn't really like sort of controversial situations. A lot of former pros, ex-players have said that, yeah. And that's maybe why he hasn't been able to maybe sort out this kind of Sanchez thing. Similar, Gallas and Toure never talked. They were bloody centre-back partners, for heaven's sake. They used to, they were playing next to each other, but didn't talk. And in the canteen, one was on one table, the other one was on another table. We hear, there's been times where the French players and the English players have been kind of separate. We hear that Mustafi got bullied when he first came, but you just feel that.
The thing is, when you're not winning, it's all these things get exposed. Remember, Dwight, the famous one with Teddy Sheringham and Andy Cole. Yeah, and they won the treble.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're right. You're right. When you're winning, you kind of don't think about it. But then, I guess when you're winning, you don't blame your fellow players. With Sheringham and Cole, maybe they didn't like each other, but I would love to know, did they rate each other? Because if they rated each other but just didn't like each other, then you kind of can can survive.
respect there.
And it's
There's
a
a
shame,
respect.
actually. We saw
Yeah.
Andy Cole at the premiere,
Yeah,
didn't we,
the
with the
after party,
89.
yeah.
I wish
Yeah.
we wish we had asked him.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Do you
so-
know anything, Ryan? You was at the after party. Do you know anything? But go on, Alex.
Yeah, no, that was all I was going to say. That if you rate your kind of players or fellow players, but don't like them, you can maybe survive. But does Sanchez not rate some of his players? And it does look like that sometimes, doesn't it? By his antics, it looked like that in Henry's last year as well. You know, Henry at times was a sort of moody, moody, emotional player, even in the Invincible season. But you knew he rated the other players, which kind of overshadowed the moodiness, if that makes sense. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems like it does need Sanchez to go, and that's, I know we're going to come on to it next, but that whole debate about kind of Sanchez, and we've talked about it a lot in our sort of Gooner Ramble group, that what's the right thing to do. Some people are saying that if it's just a straight swap with Mkhitaryan, then pull out, let him stay. But that's all good. But I just think that behind the scenes, by what we hear, it seems like it's gone too far, and for Sanchez not to play at Bournemouth, and for Wenger kind of to say that, he's a bit in and out sort of thing, that I didn't want to play him. I wanted people that are focused on the job, but played Theo Walcott. It tells me more that actually, there's more in it with Sanchez. Maybe the players didn't want him there. And I think because of that, I think we have to get rid, even though if financially it's the wrong decision, and Man United sort of pip us to fourth by a point, then it's obviously a bad decision. But I think for the squad morale, it just seems like we have to get rid of him. And that's sad, because he's a great player, no doubt about that.
Ryan, is it as simple as getting rid of Alexis Sanchez or get rid of all our ills? I mean, do you see him as the central character in this, the pantomime villain in this thing? And if he goes in, always right in the Arsenal world?
No, I don't see it as that's the only problem, but I do see it as in my opinion, Alexis Sanchez should leave Arsenal Football Club. He should leave the football club, hopefully, in my opinion, in this transfer market. I don't think it's worked out him staying on. I can completely see why we did it, actually, which I know not everyone agrees with, but I can see why we thought that maybe having Sanchez and the type of character he is, that he would just, once the season got started, he'd knuckle down and he'd get on with his football. But it hasn't turned out that way. And, I was first alarmed about Sanchez when that it was that game against Liverpool back in March, was it?
When he got dropped to the bench.
Because, firstly, if it's true what had he done and what he was doing, I think I said at the time on this show, I said that I would have taken him out of the squad completely, because if you've overstepped the mark, then you need to be punished. But by keeping him on the bench and then using him, it wasn't a sufficient punishment. But I just thought, Arsene Wenger, I can't remember him hardly ever doing that in the time he's been at the club. I can't remember him benching a player for what's gone on in the something that's gone on in the training ground. So for that to happen, that shows you what a disruptive influence he can be. Of course, he can be a fantastic player, but I think that I just want to go back on that point about Thierry, because this is something that's annoyed me for a while about Sanchez, is that he's so quick to have a go at our teammates, like Thierry did now and again, and that's okay if he demands better. But what's always annoyed me is I never ever see him
against the opposition.
I never see him against the opposition. I never see him hardly ever protecting one of our players before one of our young players gets into a sort of a little argument with another player. I never see him, and that is not something you could say about Thierry Henry. Thierry Henry would always, he might have a go at his teammates, but he wouldn't have. But he would also have. He'd be there to protect them in the same way like a Tony Adams would be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or Vieira, yeah.
And a Vieira would be. So, and that's why I've never bought into this Sanchez's a leader kind of thing. I think he's very selfish in terms of a lot of what he does. I think he knows he's doing it. You know, like that time when we were 4-0 up and he goes off and he hides himself under. I think that kind of theatre, he knows exactly what he's doing there. And I don't see him as a team player in that regard. And personally, I think that as good as he has been for us, and I think also we've been for him, because when he came to Arsenal, he came with a good reputation. I think he came with a good reputation. I think people, saw the class he had. But I think he's leaving it with a much better reputation. I think he's leaving it as people saying as he's one of the best in the world. And so I think he's benefited. Perhaps you could even argue he's benefited more as an individual than we have as a team from having him. But he's still, don't get me wrong, he's still given us some great moments. But I think, he's not signing a new contract. He's causing some issues in the dressing room, evidently. So on the pitch, I've not enjoyed his attitude in the last 6 months, especially. So I know it really does hurt to sell a player to Man United. It does, especially after the Van Persie thing. But I think we're trying to make as best situation as we can, in all fairness. Granted, we probably haven't handled it well.
Do you think though that Wenger has to be cut? I mean, you go back to the Liverpool game in March. I remember saying in the very conversation that Wenger has to take a stronger line as the manager. As a manager in any industry, any walk of life, you have to bring your staff into line, and he didn't, and he hasn't.
No, he hasn't, and
so everyone's kind of blaming squarely laid at Sanchez's door, but Wenger has to take the blame. If anything, Wenger's even more culpable because that's his job, surely.
Well, what I want to say just quickly on that is it's such a difficult decision to have to look at Chelsea, for example. Conte brought that the kind of a similar issues happened with Diego Costa, and Conte, his way of dealing with it was said, okay, well, we'll use him to the end of the season, and then he's off. But
also Ryan, he dropped him.
He did, yeah. And don't get me wrong, originally that, in my opinion, that was the right decision. That was definitely the correct decision, and that's what we should have done with Sanchez. But the other line is, if you flip the story, Conte's had this argument with Diego Costa. I don't want to talk about Chelsea for too much, but he's had this argument with Costa. Costa's gone. They've replaced him with someone, and now most of the fan base are of the conclusion that they've replaced him with someone not in the same quality. And now people are beginning to say, well, Conte's got rid of Diego Costa, and we haven't replaced him sufficiently. Whereas it's very difficult to replace a player of that quality, just like it's very difficult for us to replace a player of Sanchez's quality. So it's a really difficult line to deal with as a manager. But I think that Arsene got it wrong. I have to say, I think he got it wrong, that one.
Axe.
Yeah, going back on Sanchez, and again, trying to think sort of objectively, we kind of, the selling to Man United it does kill me a little bit, it's the Van Persie finished me, and do you know what, to be fair, I don't feel as bad with this one. Maybe that's because I just don't feel we're going to compete for the league, so actually it's kind of irrelevant, but maybe I was a bit deluded in 2012 thinking maybe we can compete, I don't know, but for me, forget the player who it was, Van Persie or Sanchez. It comes down to the contract situation for both of them, and that is ultimately what has let us down. Yep. You think of Robin Van Persie. The year before Robin went, Nasri and Fabregas left, and it was, if you remember that pre-season tour, Wenger didn't really look well. It looked like he had a bit of a mini a very mild breakdown type thing, seeing two players go, and we scraped through Udinese in the Champions League qualifier, which, by the way, Theo Walcott scored home and away. But it just seemed like at the time Van Persie had 2 years to go, and if you're thinking objectively, that would have been the time to actually say, okay, Robin, sign or go kind of thing. But we had just lost Fabregas and Nasri. So if Robin had said him not signing, which I'm sure we talked to him that summer, I'm sure we did, but he's just seen two of his mates go. He said, well, I need to see how we do this season. Arsenal were in a position where your hands are a bit tied. Like, yeah, you can be ruthless and say, no, we're just going to sell him. But then, to get replacement in when you've just sold through your three best players in one summer, who are you really going to get in that's half decent, to kind of replace him? So there it came down to potentially maybe a year before he should have got a slightly extension on his contract or something like that. But because once you get into that 2-year cycle, it just seems like players are going to hang on. So that one, I've got a bit of sympathy at the time because there was no way we could have sold Van Persie 2 years ago because we just sold Fabregas Nasri. But then obviously a year later, he had a year left. And then you thought, well, we have to kind of sell him now. We got 24 million, which was a lot for a player in his last year at the time. This was obviously before the inflated prices. And it hurt to send him to Man United. Fast forward to Sanchez, and you think, okay, well, again, the contract situation is what's let us down. There's rumours that he verbally agreed to sign, but then the Bayern Munich game is what just changed his mind. It killed him. Losing 10-2, he realised that actually this team can't compete with the best in the world. And I think what killed him more was, he missed the penalty, he scored the rebound, wasn't it? And it kind of, we were 1-1 away from home at the Allianz, and I think he had belief then, but then it just came crashing down. When Koscielny went off injured. So then it all changed for him. And then, so we got to the situation last summer where we thought, okay, we've had this before now. We have messed up because actually he should have maybe been on he should have had an extra year potentially when he first signed.
He should have, yeah.
Or after the first season when we've seen that actually he settled into England quite well. Let's give him a bit of a pay rise and let's extend his contract now. Maybe that should have been done. But then, so you've got to the summer and you've thought, okay, well, past experience, we sold Van Persie, they went and won the league. What do we do this season? And I think, Arsenal looked at it and thought, okay, well, Sanchez has got that personality where actually when he's on the pitch, he wants to play. And I think Arsene Wenger genuinely believed that. Personally, what I believe killed that was when Chile didn't qualify for the World Cup. I think that's when he just thought, oh, wow. I'm not going to be playing it. It was a massive blow to him. And then not really maybe wanting to be at Arsenal was just, I'm convinced he thought he was going to Man City. I've worked with someone who's kind of got a relative who, was quite a sort of, was a director at Man City, and he tells me that Sanchez had the kit ready to put on for the photos on that last day in Chile. He was on international duty, and obviously the move did affect him. And if you remember, he didn't quite play the first couple of games, and he came on against Bournemouth, and so it just, to me, that was the moment where actually his motivation went. And I do believe if Chile were in the World Cup, he might have had a different sort of 5 months, and he might not be as keen to get out because he would have thought, I don't want to rock the boat. I've got the World Cup. It's for my country. Let's just stay here till the end of the season. But I think with no World Cup, he's just desperate to get out, and that's why he's playing up.
I have to go back to your point that you made about the initial contract situation, and something that really bugged me about it is Ozil came the year before on a 5-year deal.
Yeah, exactly.
He's come the year after on a 4-year deal. That tells that again. I can understand speculation. I don't know what's going on in the negotiating room, but it just seems that his team had the upper hand. Yeah. I'm going to have a 4-year deal. Thank you very much. Yeah. Nobody actually thought, oh, wait a minute, we could get into a situation where these two guys are running down their contracts in the same year.
Yeah, it's pretty schoolboy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was, I agree. I don't know why he had a year less. Maybe
remember he was bombed out of Barcelona.
Yeah. But what frustrates me is a season in, you can reevaluate. You think, okay, well, he settled well. Because the other flip side of it is, if you're giving him a long 5-year contract, and actually in the first year he has an absolute awful season, doesn't settle in, and is a complete flop, and sort of Angel Di Maria type, had some good moments, but pretty much was a flop and didn't settle. Then you kind of think, well, okay, we're in a bit of trouble here. His values drop now and things like that. But after the first season and it goes well, you think, let's talk to him now. So now he's got 3 years left. Let's talk to him now, and let's just get an extra year or two on that contract. Let's give him a rise if we have to, but let's get him secure. And I think it comes down to the contract situation. It's today, I can't really slate Arsenal for selling to Man United, because I think it's the only real option. But I slate them for not getting that contract situation sorted earlier. And we're kind of getting into that cycle again now, and players seem to be, certainly at Arsenal, just waiting really, just to see, let's see what happens, let's see who's here. There's a lot of uncertainty with the manager, as there was last season. There probably will be again this summer, and there certainly will be again next summer. So players seem like they've got the upper hand. And what you mentioned about that Ryan mentioned about that Liverpool game is spot on. That moment, a bit like Alex Iwobi, I guess, as well. Like, you want them punished. You want them not to play. And as soon as you've taken him, even if you've dropped him to the bench, but as soon as you've brought him on when you're 1-0 down to rescue a game, you have given the player all the power. You've given them the power. You've literally handed it to them and said, you know what? This team does need you, actually, mate. You're probably more important than everyone else. And he got that then. He knew it. If you remember he was kind of smiling and laughing on the bench sitting next to, was it Lucas Perez or whoever it was? He was having a bit of a laugh. Like, just, for someone who's being punished, he didn't look like he was being punished, and he certainly didn't seem to really care.
I tell you what, for me, this whole Man United thing is more of a spiritual thing because of who they are and who the manager is, rather than where they are. Rather than where they are, we're not challenging, and they're not really going to. I don't see Man United challenging the next.
But it's still Man United.
Yeah,
you're right,
it's still Man United. And it's Jose Mourinho.
Yeah.
Ryan, 2019, we've got Aaron Ramsey, Olivier Giroud, Danny Welbeck, Nacho Monreal, Peter Cech, David Ospina,
Chuba Rakpon. Come on, be fair.
We've got all those guys.
I think Reece Nelson maybe as well, actually.
Yeah, Reece Nelson. Yeah. And I've heard today that there's been talk about
Real Madrid, wasn't it?
Yeah, possible PSG. Possibly he might not sign on. Ryan, what can we do to avoid this situation again next time? Because it's looking kind of full already.
Yeah, no, sure when you say it like that. But I think we brought in someone now who probably should have been brought in a while ago, but I think I can't pronounce his name.
Hasfami or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
You talking about Sven or you talking about Raul?
No.
Hasfami.
Right. I'm talking about the guy who's been brought in to deal with the contracts.
Oh, contracts. Yeah. Sorry.
So if you look at it like that, then at least the club are doing something. I mean, for me, I don't know why the contracts are getting left to 1 year. I think on 2 years, when there's 2 years left, I think you make a decision. You either offer. You want them to commit to your club, and if they don't, then you look to sell them. Otherwise, you leave yourselves in a position where you can get a player run down their contract and not get the maximum fee for them. Just out of that list, if I'm going to be totally honest, the only one who I'd say, if you were to say right now, who I'd keep Ramsey. I'd offer him. The others, I think, I really like Giroud, but I just get the feeling he's not totally content with this role he has in the side.
But there's news tonight that he's interested in going to Dortmund, and Dortmund are interested in taking him for 6 months. So
makes sense on a World Cup year, I suppose.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, with the manager situation as well, is that we don't ever play two up front. We just never play two up front. So it's not like Giroud's coming in and, back in the old days where we played 4-4-2 and you could have Wiltord and new, and they would all play 30 games a season. We don't play two up front, so they're not getting games unless they're coming on in the final 15 minutes. Some of these, so I think Welbeck has really struggled this season. I don't know if you guys have noticed as well.
I've noticed some.
I feel like the injuries have affected him, because I always used to think that whilst Welbs wasn't a good finisher, I don't think he's ever been a good finisher. I used to think he was sharp around the box, if you know what I mean. In terms of he could find the extra yard to get a shot away, or he could do a bit of skills. I think this year he's really struggled, and he's probably one they might look to move on. Petr Cech, is he?
Like you said, the main thing is Ramsey, isn't it? It's Ramsey and possibly Reece Nelson if that's I think that's a problem, if that's going to be an issue.
I don't think that's going to be an issue, but then there's a few there that you'd say if they moved on, it wouldn't be the end of the world, would it?
No, absolutely.
I think personally, maybe Nacho, you would want an extra year from him at least.
Was Nacho in there?
I think so you want an extra year from him.
Did he sign one last year, or was?
I think it was just a year extension or something like that recently.
Right, okay.
He'll get a year because he's in his 30s, isn't he? So.
Yeah. But then that's you know what? Funny enough, I saw a tweet on that yesterday actually saying that how, you know, Wenger back in the day only used to give 1 year deals to people over 30, but now he's about to splash out X amount of million on a 29-year-old or whatever like that. Like, you know, but then at the same time, they say that Wenger hasn't changed with the times. So you can't really win sometimes, can you? Like, it just made me chuckle.
I have another question for you guys, just on a totally different tangent. 2019 is a big year also for the you know, the commercial side of things.
Yeah.
We have been lagging behind. In our comms deals, we're not really making that much. I think ASD said, was it about 9 million we made all in last year, uplift or something like that? I can't remember. It was something poor. It was mediocre. Now we've got a chance to sort of like bring in some new. Chelsea has got somebody sent off just now. I think it's Pedro in the last minute of extra.
Oh wow! It's going to penalties then, is it?
Yeah, it'll be penalties soon. You know, we've got. You know, we're gonna. You know, there's a chance to bring in some potentially new investors. Now, if we want to get the big boy deals, we need to be obviously in Champions League, but we've got to have the curb appeal as well. The curb appeal obviously is Champions League football, and some, you know, if not marquee players, players of a caliber that you know are going to be world class. You know, companies deal with synergies. They want to be aligned with companies that are doing well, that you know that are doing as well as them. How do we go about making sure we don't get ourselves into this position again and really sort of like earning the best buck that we can? I'll start with you, Action, and go over to Ryan.
I mean, just on all that, I guess, you know, I mean, it's one rule the Premier League have brought in is obviously you can only increase your wages by 7 million. Unless you can prove other things. So basically what they want, they don't want everyone.
So basically the TV money.
Yeah, they don't want everyone spending their whole TV money on wages and on players basically. So it's kind of, there's a bit of a restriction there. But if you're good commercially and if you have good matchday revenue, then you're kind of showing them that, you know, we're not using all our TV money. We have got streams coming from elsewhere. So for argument's sake, if Alexis and Mesut Ozil had signed contracts, that 7 million is smashed just there. So if you want additional players, if you want to strengthen the squad, you're kind of in a situation where if your commercial deals aren't good, you can't actually prove that you can't really spend more on wages, which does lead to a problem, which means you have to maybe offload, which is why maybe Theo Walcott's gone. But you know, so that's kind of a situation. And if your commercial deals aren't great, which ours are, you know, we've gone in cycles. Obviously, when the Emirates stays, we are kind of deals were good for the time in terms of we got a lot of money up front and all that kind of stuff, but they weren't good maybe in total value, but it suited us at the time. And I there's no criticism there because we were building a stadium. We weren't just given a stadium like Man City or West Ham sort of thing. So that's fair enough. And then obviously we renegotiated, was it 14, which, it was at a time where maybe we'd won the FA Cup, but it was a slightly rocky time. But this one is even more rockier because you think, who's going to want to sponsor Arsenal if they're not in the Champions League? Firstly, you get Champions League money and you get more TV money from Champions League. So that's a big kind of tick anyway. But then, people want to sponsor the best, and also it's players as well, like Mesut Ozil and Alexis Sanchez. They will get us a few extra million easily with commercial deals because people want to sponsor the best players as well.
They're a brand. They're a brand,
and without them, you've suddenly lost. I mean, you think about that. If you take Ozil and Sanchez out, like we saw at Bournemouth, who actually is a brand, or who actually is a bit of a superstar there? You look through the team and you think, I don't think there's even one, Ramsey.
Sorry, Morata's just been sent off, double second yellow card. It's unbelievable.
What, Pedro and Morata?
Morata's just been sent off for diving, second yellow.
Okay. So you kind of, that's going to be really boring for viewers, by the way, who obviously know all this when they listen. Anyway, so you've lost my chain of thought there. Bloody Morata. Why are you talking about Morata and an Arsenal pod? Jeez, man. What, seriously, what was I saying? You've lost me. You've actually lost me.
You said players. You were talking about players.
Okay, so superstars, a brand. So you looked at that and you think, well, Ramsey maybe is a bit of a brand, but Wilshire's kind of coming back. But really, if put it this way, if you had a business, let's talk small terms. You had a business and you were going to sponsor a football team, Arsenal would probably be your sixth, maybe even seventh choice now, wouldn't they? And that's a problem. So, I think getting into the Champions League is absolutely massive this season, massive. And if that's through the Europa League, so be it. If that's through the league, if we can get on a good run, then obviously that's great as well, which is kind of why you hope that Sanchez is replaced efficiently. So if it is Mkhitaryan, but then you get that about Aubameyang in, or you because you kind of feel that actually spending that money now, and if we can get into, I don't know if you can play in the Europa League, but if spending that money now, and if it does work out, we took a risk on Sanchez staying. We thought maybe he could get us to fourth, and if if we had got there, it would have been a masterstroke because you would have got the Champions League money, you would have got better maybe commercial deals and everything. So actually it might have worked out, but it hasn't. So if we do take a risk, which I think we need to, it sort of has to pay off, because if this club's not in the Champions League 2 years running, then I do fear, and you can probably kiss goodbye to Mesut Ozil as well. A player like that in his peak deserves to play in the Champions League, really, let's be honest. So that does scare me. It does scare me a bit.
Ryan, what do you think the strategy should be? I mean, look, we've had two massive, big mega stars in our midst, and we've not really taken advantage of that in terms of commercial deals. One's going, one's probably or may well go at the end of the season coming into 2019. What do you think the club's strategy should be? Because, Champions League really, from that perspective, is absolutely essential in terms of, window dressing. What do you think the strategy should be on the with the player side of things? Because obviously players also, as we've been discussing, players also really have an effect on companies aligning themselves with other companies.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's difficult. I think if we can, right, let's, for example, I don't know what's happened, but if there's the players that we want to bring in now to replace Ozil or Sanchez, whatever, I think we should get them in now, regardless whether people think the top four has got. I think if we want those players, get them in now. Give us the best chance of trying to get in the top four, whether that's try and get into the Europa League, whether that's finishing in the top four or winning it, which might be more realistic. But also, so we can actually have those players bedded in for next season. that's something that I don't feel we always do. You know, we sometimes leave it to the last minute of the window. I think if we could have the players we want in now, then at least then you can say, well, we've got who we've chosen to have playing for the club, sort the contract situations out, and then really give it a go for the Champions League next year. But what I'll say is, I still think, and this might just be me being a bit, I still think we are a very attractive club, both to players and investors. I think we're in London. We've got an amazing stadium. We pay good wages. You know, we're paying good wages. Maybe not quite what Man United are, but you know, you look at our social media following. It's huge. You look at the revenue we make from games. It's massive. People don't let people think that Arsenal are not a big club. We're still a massive club, and we can still attract investment, and we can still attract the top players. But what we have to do is we have to show the ambition. You know, we have to show that we are serious about getting into the Champions League, winning big titles. You know, I think that's what a lot of the fans are frustrated about, is that we maybe haven't shown the ambition that that a size of our club should and could be. When they kept with Arsene, funnily enough, one of the main points for it that was being brought in was that because this guy has been in the Champions League 19 out of 20 seasons, so let's give him another chance. So I think we definitely saw it. We definitely saw that getting back into the Champions League was a major thing. It's not worked out this season. But yeah, I think the key to it is the Champions League. And Mesut Ozil, is he definitely leaving? I mean,
I don't know.
Don't know.
I mean, some people said that Mkhitaryan is de facto his replacement.
Yeah, and I can see that. And you know, there's probably a good chance he is. But I mean, if he were to stay, I think that would be massive, because he's not just a superstar on the pitch. He is one off it.
It's a massive brand off the pitch.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I agree. I mean, you know, someone like Mesut Ozil sees the two Dortmund lads and Malcolm come in. Suddenly, you are showing ambition. You know, you've got rid of Theo Walcott, who has been a great player for this club, in my opinion, or been a very good player anyway. But you know, wasn't really influencing and wasn't contributing much, so that's an upgrade. And then you've got rid of Sanchez and potentially got two in instead, and some two hopefully who are going to integrate themselves in the team, so potentially you're stronger. Certainly how kind of Sanchez has played this season. So
Aubameyang's been one of the best strikers in Europe for a good while now, hasn't he?
Exactly. So
I don't think that's being talked about much as a massive. That is, if you had said to me that we're going to play, I didn't hear anyone link us with Aubameyang until a couple of days ago. But it was just like people were going, are they going to replace Sanchez and get them with Aubameyang? And I was thinking, oh God, this is one of the best strikers in the world here. That's a massive statement as far as I'm concerned.
And it has been underplayed.
Playing devil's advocate though about him, and I don't know the reason, but he's 28. You know,
29.
29.
Practically.
The Blackburn George thing, yeah. but you know, 28, 29, whatever. But you think, why has he not gone to a Real Madrid or you know, like, because they were linked with him a lot, weren't they?
A lot.
Then there was rumours he was going to go to China or Russia or somewhere to earn money. But
it's not everyone ends up going. It's a bit like Mo Salah.
Yeah.
Going for 37 million, and then everyone says well, no one else wanted him. Why did not everyone can go everywhere? You know what I mean by that? Like, you can't. There's however many in a squad. So just because people might not have fancied you, that doesn't mean that. I would prefer to look at the record of the player, and I look at a player that scores hell of a lot of goals. Okay, might not be the best league in the world, but he's got a good Champions League record. He's got a good Europa League record. He consistently scores goals. And it just might be that we just have a period where we've invested the time to try and sign him at a time that someone else hasn't. So I think if we ended up with Aubameyang to replace Sanchez, in terms of, okay, you have to work it out position, because he's not a direct replacement. But in terms of a name, I'm not too sure right now in the position
That's
we are.
like for like.
There's many bigger, maybe. Yeah. No. I was just playing devil's advocate. I would love him here.
I have to ask one, because one thing that's been going back and forth in my mind is this. Yeah. There's no doubt in my mind, in our mind, that he's one of the top strikers in the world. Absolutely no doubt. His injury record is absolutely amazing. He hardly misses matches. In the 6 years, since 2012 to 2018, he misses like 3 days out of injury. It's incredible. He's like he's a 29-year-old or 28-year-old going on 25 in terms of physically.
Wait till he comes to Arsenal.
We'll spoil that. We'll take that. But then the flip side is, apart from the goals, which is unbelievable, he was Golden Boot winner or something like that. The flip side of it is he does have disciplinary issues. Yeah. That's bad. That is bad. Now, whether it's because Dortmund didn't let him go to Real Madrid, and that was a dying wish of his grandfather, or whatever the reasons are, you cannot dismiss that. And that is a big red, a big alarm, a big red, a big massive danger sign. Yeah. Especially the way we run.
But I mean, you think at 29 or whatever he is, you think, what, three years at the top, and then you might see a decline. So you think, usually when a player goes to a new club, they tend to behave themselves at least for a year or two, don't they? So
some people
you would
saying
hope. The scout Sven, he's talked highly of him, and it just seems like maybe he knows how to control him. Maybe these problems started when Sven went, So I don't know. That doesn't bother me as much.
People did say, look, he's only had these. He's only kicking up fuss because Dortmund broke a promise to him or something, or whatever, an agreement to him. So, what do you reckon, Ryan? I mean.
I can't comment on his this because I don't follow Dortmund. I don't really know the link. What I'll say is that unfortunately we are not in the position where we can get an absolute perfect player with a perfect record off the pitch and a perfect record off the pitch. I think we know how it is to have players with disciplinary problems, but if he comes to us and does, I don't care if he's 28 or 29. If he comes to us and does, in 2 years, he scores 50 goals in 70 appearances and then wants to move on, then I think, okay.
You take that.
Yeah.
Take that. If that gets us back into the Champions League, I think I'd take that. I do get what you're saying. If you buy a player with a bad attitude to replace one, it's not great practice in theory. But I just don't think we are in the best position right now to dismiss a player like that because we think he's got attitude problems.
Cool. All right. Before we go, Theo Walcott has left the club. Pastures new. As we did with Coquelin last week, Axe, let's...
I've got to give Theo more of a tribute, I'm afraid. I mean, I wrote a piece on it just because I felt very passionate. Because it all started when, about a week or 10 days ago, I tweeted something about that. I find it quite bizarre, the amount of disrespect Theo Walcott really gets. He's a man who scored 100 goals for the club. He's scored in, big games. He's kind of been here for the peak of his career, really, and I find it amazing. And people came back and said, well, it's been 12 years and things like that, which I think is a simplistic argument. I think 12 years, but he was 16, 17, 18 in his first 3 seasons. He was injured for 2 seasons probably from that. So his actual record is about 1 in 4. So, it's not bad for a winger. And then with assist as well, he's probably contributed to about 170, 180 goals in his 395 appearances or whatever. So it's not a bad record. And I just think but then so so that's kind of why I wrote the piece, just to I wanted to explain it in more detail. Twitter have kindly given me 280 characters, but it still wasn't enough. But then, you kind of saw today a bit of a change, and you saw there was a lot of respect for Theo Walcott, certainly online, and people were wishing him well and were paying tribute to him. People were honest and maybe said, he wasn't the world's best player technically or anything like that, but he did a good job while he was here. And I think people were starting to see the seeing his record and thinking, actually, maybe he wasn't as bad. I think I saw a tweet about that. He had either one less or one more goal than Dennis Bergkamp, and Theo had only actually been here about a year more or something like that. It wasn't, and obviously he was very young in his first season, so it was, you let that kind of sink in and you think, yeah, maybe, obviously he was nowhere near Dennis, but in terms of goal scoring, he scored goals for the club. So, I just think he's given us some great moments. I mean, I look in this piece I wrote, which you can find on the Gooner Ramble blog, I kind of go through every season, and I was myself surprised how many times he scored against Chelsea, for example. I think he ended with about 8 or 9 goals against Chelsea. He had obviously scored quite a few against Spurs. He had scored a few against Man United, Liverpool, Man City.
I listed all his big game strikes.
Yeah, you did. You tweeted it, didn't you? Barcelona, Bayern Munich. He got those 2 assists in the Champions League against Milan, who were actually
the first goal in the FA Cup final.
Holders at the time. Yeah. Liverpool, the assist, FA Cup final, League Cup final, FA Cup semi-final. So I mean, it's that assist even in Barcelona when Nicolas Bentner scored and we went 1-up, and it was all about Theo Walcott at that time. So, I think he's been limited. He's had 2 good attributes, pace, and his finishing's half decent, and he's utilised that. I mean, the criticism people do give him is maybe, did he kind of, when Van Persie left, he saw the opportunity to get more money and things like that. But at the end of the day, what footballer doesn't, and what human being doesn't? If they see an opportunity and they think, well, they can afford to give me more, I'm going to try and get more. I think we would all do that at our workplace, surely. And an agent wouldn't really be an agent if he's not getting the player the best deal possible. So at the end of the day, Theo did sign up, signed a ting as we talked about at the time. And at the end of the day, he stayed when a lot of players left. So yeah, people listening may disagree, and that's fair. Football is about opinions, and I get that and I respect that. But for me, he was a good player, did well for the club. I really hope he does well at Everton. I hope he continues his record of scoring in big games, but just not against us, obviously. And, I hope he hope he has a really good, 4 months and, is maybe a wild card to go to the World Cup, and then I can support him again in an England shirt. And it'll be weird in 2 weeks seeing him come, I mean, Ryan, you'll be the same, where we sit, second half, as long as we shoot where we normally shoot, second half, he'll be maybe on the right-hand side, going towards the clock end, so right in front of us again. So it'll be weird to see him in a blue shirt, but fair play to him, good luck, and, hope he starts enjoying his football again.
Right, I don't know how you're going to follow that, but what do you want to say?
So I'm very passionate about him.
I mean, it's weird that Theo's leaving, because I'm in my mid-20s now, and I think when Theo joined, I'm a teenager, so it's crazy to think that how long he's been here. I think with Theo Walcott is the worst thing that happened is that people thought he could be like Thierry, and he's nothing like Thierry, because Thierry had fantastic ball skills. He was brilliant on the ball, Thierry. Theo was never good on the ball, really. He was never a dribbler. He was never had great ball control. What he did have, as Akhil said, was brilliant pace. And I think with that, he really worked on his game, and he did improve it. He made better runs during his time here. His final ball got better. He got 100 goals in 400 games, 1 in 4 from basically the wing. I think what I will say as well is he probably should have just appreciated being a winger.
Yeah, he pissed about a bit, didn't he, in the striker stuff, yeah.
The players who he played with who were playing him through balls from the winger, like Fabregas, Nasri, Arshavin, Wilshere, Song. He suited that role. And when we had that team, I think in 2010, he was despite probably being the least talented of the front six.
Most effective. One of the most effective.
He was, because if we played everyone else, it was like, okay, we're going to play really nice football, but not one of those players can get behind the last defence. So I think he made almost the most of what he could offer. I think he could have done just slightly better. But I don't think it's like how you see these articles, big regrets over healthy. I think he probably could have done slightly better, but not too much. But I do just want to quickly say as well, because a lot of footballers, they have good PR and stuff, and people say they're a nice guy. When I was in uni and I went to do some work experience at Arsenal, Theo was the nicest guy you could ever wish to come across. I remember I was quite nervous, and I went to speak to some of the players, and Theo asked me what I was studying. He asked me what year I was in, what I wanted to do after. And I was really taken aback by that, because for a footballer, you expect them to, maybe sign your photo, like take a picture with you and sign something. But for him to actually, for him to chat with me meant a lot. I was only, I think 18, 19 at the time. So I just want to say good luck to Theo. He's a really, really nice guy, and hopefully he can, I don't know what he wants to achieve at Everton. I think obviously get back into the England squad and just play more, but I really hope it works out for him,
I've seconded that in terms of I've met him a few times too, lucky enough to meet him a few times too, and every time he was such a, humble guy, and like you, Ryan, he seemed like he was interested in people a little bit and things like that. And, I sort of remember once telling him that, because my wife, she was obviously my girlfriend at the time, but she's always liked Theo Walcott, but I think she just finds him cute. And I actually told him, I said that sometimes, like, when she's annoyed at me for doing something or saying something, she'll tell me, look how Theo Walcott is, in every interview, he's so well spoken and so polite and things like that. So I told him that she bloody says your name when and she's annoyed at me, and he apologized to me. He actually said, I'm really sorry about that. Like, it was just, he was a nice guy, and there's no, Arsenal do bring up players well like that, and England used to put Theo up to do interviews a lot, and Arsenal certainly did, because he is well spoken, and he is, he is a class act in that way, so fair play to him.
Two things did for Theo Walcott: the coffee maker and a selfie with Axe. He joins the vanquished, like Alex Oxlade. Who else did you get a selfie with? We could probably decipher who's going to go next, right? The charity ball that you went to?
Well, other people were doing it, so I thought, well, I'm going to do it. I just thought, this is something in 20 years that I look back and think, wow, look through those pictures. But
you are the kiss of death.
Yeah, I mean, Oxlade-Chamberlain obviously sat next to me, so selfie's one. The selfie you leave eventually, you sit next to me, you're leaving pretty soon by the looks of it. But who did I got Welbeck.
There you go then.
Rob Holding, which, surely he won't be going yet, will he?
Robert's next.
Yeah, I did get Mesut though, but yeah, let's not talk about that.
Yeah,
it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember, like, I when we've been linked with Mahrez like every window, and I met Riyad Mahrez in Leicester. It was weird. There's a Holiday Inn Express right opposite sort of the King Power. I was there on business, staying out there. A work colleague had just, we were having a few beers, kind of, we'd finished for the day. It was about 11 o'clock. A colleague had gone out for a cigarette, so I kind of went with him. And then he had finished his cigarette, my phone rang, so I was still outside for a bit, and then there was a lot of commotion, so I just kind of had a little wonder and walked. And it was actually the Leicester charity ball that night, and Riyad Mahrez just comes out, walks straight past me, and I'm like, oh, all right, Riyad. And I'm dressed obviously still in my suit, so he must have thought I was in the event, which is why he stopped and talked to me. And then, I got a picture with him.
How long ago was that?
That was the season they were champions, actually. So what
That's why. That's why I did.
That's why it never came. Yeah.
You kiboshed it.
Yeah.
You are the kiss of death.
He might have been coming, and then he met me and thought, nah. But yeah.
The curse of Akhil. It's a lovely way to wrap it up. I want to thank my erstwhile panelist, Akhil, for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
No worries. Enjoyed that tonight, actually. It was a good chat.
Indeed it was. And also our special guest, Ryan Rocastle. Thank you very, very much, sir, for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
I think we put him to sleep.
Yeah, he maybe he doesn't want to get too close because he might have to leave Arsenal or something like that.
All right, I've been your host, Giles. Catch me at AFC_Giles. Catch us on all the platforms. Please subscribe, rate, comment, like. Feedback would be really, really grateful. Catch us again. We'll probably do a transfer update, I think.
A day or so, yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah, and then aside from that, we'll obviously be looking back next week on the game of the weekend against
Palace.
Whoever it is, Palace or whatever.
Yeah.
All right, so catch us again next time on the Gooner Ramble. I've been your host, Giles. Up your Arsenal.
I'll be Arsenal.
This episode of the Gooner Ramble is sponsored by the new sporting betting app called Bookie. That's BOOKEE. Sign up using the promo code podcast. Deposit and bet £10 in multiple bets for a free £10 bet. Please bet responsibly.